Did you know that right now, in Britain, millions of people who thought they were solidly middle class are slipping away, and the numbers prove it's happening faster than ever? Okay, so let's dive right in. Imagine you're someone who's got a steady job, maybe a house or at least renting a decent place, kids in school, and you're saving a bit for holidays or retirement. That's what most of us picture when we talk about the middle class in Britain. But over the last few years, that picture's starting to fade for a lot of folks. In this video, I'm going to lay out exactly why Britain's middle class is quietly disappearing, backed up by real data and stories from history. We'll go through how it all started after World War II, what changed in the 80s and 90s, and why things are hitting a wall now in 2026. By the end, you'll see the proof and understand what it means for everyday people like you and me. The big problem here is that the middle class, those families earning around £30,000 to £60,000 a year, isn't holding steady anymore. Instead, more and more are dropping down into lower income brackets or struggling just to stay afloat. Think about it, you work hard, pay your taxes, but bills keep rising, jobs feel less secure, and buying a home seems like a dream from another time. This isn't just a feeling, it's a real challenge that's reshaping our society. And if we don't face it, Britain could end up with even bigger gaps between the rich and everyone else, leading to more stress, less opportunity, and a country that feels divided. To really get this, we have to go back in time and explore how the middle class in Britain grew strong after the war and then started to weaken. Let's start with the years right after 1945, when World War II ended. Britain was in ruins, bombs had destroyed cities, food was rationed, and millions of soldiers were coming home looking for work. But something amazing happened. The government, under leaders like Clement Attlee, set up the welfare state. This meant free healthcare through the NHS, better schools for everyone, and benefits to help if you lost your job. It was like a safety net that lifted people up. Back then, the middle class wasn't as big as it is today, or at least not in the way we think of it. In the late 1940s, a lot of people were still working in factories, mines, or farms, what we'd call working-class jobs. But with the economy rebuilding, new opportunities popped up. Factories started making cars, fridges, and TVs, and more people got office jobs or became teachers and nurses. By the 1950s, prosperity was spreading. Harold Macmillan, who was Prime Minister later, famously said, "You've never had it so good." And he was kind of right for many. Incomes rose, and for the first time, regular folks could afford a car or a washing machine. Let me paint a picture of what life was like. Say you're a young family in the 1950s. Dad might work in a factory in the Midlands, earning enough to buy a small house with a garden. Mum stays home or works part-time, and the kids go to a new comprehensive school. Holidays? Maybe a week at the seaside in Blackpool. Data from back then shows that the share of income going to the top 10% of earners dropped from about 35% in the 1930s to around 21% by the late 1970s. That means more money was flowing to the middle and bottom. The middle class grew because jobs were stable, unions were strong, and you could stay in one company for life. Owner-occupation of homes jumped from just 10% in 1914 to over 30% by the 1960s. People felt secure, and that security built the middle class. Now, let's move to the 1960s. This was a time of big changes. The Beatles were everywhere, fashion was swinging, and the economy was booming. Service jobs started to take over from heavy industry. Think banks, shops, and tourism. The middle class expanded even more because education got better, more kids went to university, thanks to grants that covered fees and living costs. If you were born in the 1950s, your chances of moving up from working class to middle class were higher than ever. Stats show that professionals and managers went from about 1 in 7 workers in 1911 to 1 in 3 by the 1990s, but a lot of that growth happened in the 60s and 70s. But it wasn't all perfect. There were strikes and inflation starting to creep up. Still, the welfare state kept things balanced. Child poverty dropped to about 15% by the mid-1970s, and inequality was at its lowest. The Gini coefficient, that's a way to measure how uneven incomes are, fell sharply after the war. Everyone shared in the growth. A factory worker could afford a semi-detached house in suburbs like those in Manchester or Birmingham. Families had one car, maybe a colour TV by the late 60s. It felt like Britain was becoming a fairer place, where hard work really paid off. Then came the 1970s, and things got bumpy. Oil prices shot up because of crises in the Middle East, leading to inflation hitting 24% in 1975. That's crazy. Imagine your shopping costing twice as much in a year. Strikes shut down power and rubbish piled up in the streets during the winter of discontent in 1978 to 79. But even then, the middle class held on. Wages kept up with prices for many, and home ownership kept rising. The class structure was shifting, more people in white-collar jobs, like clerks or salespeople, which were seen as middle class. Data from the time shows the intermediate occupations, things like shop owners or supervisors, grew, while unskilled manual jobs shrank. This all sets the stage for the big turn in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. She came in 1979 promising to fix the economy, and her policies changed everything. Privatization sold off state-owned companies like British Telecom and British Gas, creating shareholders out of regular people. But it also meant job losses in old industries like coal mining and steel. The north of England and Scotland got hit hard. Think of places like Liverpool or Glasgow, where factories closed and unemployment soared to over 3 million in 1986. For the middle class, it was a mixed bag. If you were in the south, especially London, you might benefit from booming finance jobs in the city. House prices started rising fast, and if you owned one, you felt richer. But inequality spiked. The share of income for the top 10% jumped back up from 21% in 1979 to over 30% by the 1990s. Thatcher's tax cuts helped higher earners, but benefits were cut for the poor. Child poverty doubled to over 30%. The middle class started feeling pressure because jobs became less secure, no more job for life. Gig work and short contracts crept in, though not as bad as today. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're a teacher in the 1980s. Your salary might not keep up with house prices, which doubled in some areas. But if you bought early, you could sell and move up. Stats show wealth inequality stayed high, with the top 10% owning half of all wealth. But for many in the middle, life improved materially: more cars, foreign holidays to Spain. Yet, the gap widened. The patrimonial middle class, that's the next 40% after the top 10, held about 40% of wealth by the 1990s, up from earlier, but the bottom half had only 10%. Moving to the 1990s under John Major and then Tony Blair from 1997. New Labour kept some Thatcher ideas but added social help, like tax credits for working families and the minimum wage in 1999. The economy grew, and the middle class seemed stable. Internet and tech jobs emerged, and more people went to uni. Student numbers tripled from the 1980s. Home ownership peaked at around 68% by 2000. But under the surface, debt was rising, people borrowed for houses and cars, and inequality didn't fall much. The Gini stayed high compared to the 1970s. Think about a typical middle-class family in the 90s, parents both working, maybe one in IT, the other in retail management. Kids have computers at home, family holidays to Florida. But rents in cities like London started climbing, pushing some out. Data shows median incomes grew, but the top pulled away. By 2000, the richest 10% had incomes growing faster than the middle. Then, bam, the 2008 financial crash. Banks failed, the government bailed them out, and austerity kicked in under the coalition from 2010. Cuts to public services hit hard. Wages froze or fell in real terms. They didn't recover to pre-2008 levels until around 2020. The middle class felt it. Teachers, nurses, office workers saw pay squeezes. Housing became impossible for young people. Average house prices hit 8 times average earnings by 2015, up from 3 times in the 1990s. Exploration here gets deeper. Let's look at why this happened. First, globalization meant jobs moved to cheaper countries like China. British manufacturing shrank from 25% of the economy in 1980 to under 10% now. Service jobs replaced them, but many are low-paid, like in call centers or delivery. Second, technology automated routine jobs. Think accountants using software instead of ledgers. That hit middle-skilled jobs hardest, what economists call the job polarization. High-skill jobs like programmers grew, low-skill like cleaning stayed, but middle ones shrank. Third, policy choices. Austerity cut benefits and public spending, while tax breaks favored the rich. Inheritance tax thresholds rose, helping wealthy families pass on more. Education costs soared, uni fees went to £9,000 a year in 2012, saddling grads with debt. And immigration, while bringing talent, increased competition for jobs in some areas. By the 2010s, Brexit added fuel. The 2016 vote led to uncertainty, then the 2020 deal hit trade. Inflation from supply issues made everything pricier. Then COVID in 2020 shut down the economy, with furlough helping but leaving scars. Remote work changed jobs, but many small businesses closed. Now, fast forward to the 2020s. Data from 2025 shows the middle class is shrinking fast. A report from the Resolution Foundation says the bottom half of earners will be 2% worse off by the end of the decade compared to 2019. The 10th percentile, that's low middle incomes, could be 8% down, or about £1,000 a year. Middle households on 40 to 60k are struggling with housing costs in London. Rents eat half a paycheck. Another study from a Burden Financial Fairness Trust in 2024 said even households on 60k a year feel precarious. There's a 1 in 3 chance someone middle income today won't be next year, due to job insecurity. Insecure work, 0-hour contracts, gig economy like Uber traps people. Single parents in middle jobs are over half in insecure roles. Wealth gaps are huge. In 2025, Euronews reported the richest 10% in London have 12 times the wealth of median households. To match the top 10%'s wealth, an average worker needs to save their whole salary for 52 years. That's up from 38 years in 2008. The Office for National Statistics shows real wages barely moved since 2008, with only 1.2% growth in 2025. Personal stories bring this home. Take Sarah, a 35-year-old teacher in Manchester. She earns 35k, but after rent at £1,200 a month, bills, and student loans, saving for a house is impossible. Her parents bought in the 80s for 50k, and now it's 300k. Or Mike, a 40-year-old IT guy in Bristol on 50k. His job secure, but energy bills doubled post-Ukraine war in 2022, and childcare for 2 kids costs £1,500 a month. They're middle class on paper but feel squeezed. Regionally, it's worse outside London. In the northeast, median incomes are 25k versus 40k in the southeast. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation in 2025 said 18.5 million feel economically insecure, driving votes like in recent elections. Global trends play in. Inequality rose worldwide, but Britain's hit hard because of deindustrialization. Compare to Germany, where manufacturing stayed strong, middle class is steadier. Pensions are another issue. In the 1970s, company pensions were common. Now, many rely on state pension, which is basic. Auto-enrollment helps, but contributions are low. By 2029, projections show pensioner households slightly better off, but working-age ones down 1.9% for middle-aged. Education's key too. Post-war, free uni opened doors. Now, debt averages 45k. Grads earn more, but the premium's falling, 10% less than expected for some degrees. Taxes, middle earners pay more proportionally. National insurance hikes in 2022 hit workers, while corporation tax cuts help businesses. Immigration policies post-Brexit made skilled worker shortages, pushing wages up in some sectors but down in others. Energy crisis from 2022, bills up 50%, hitting middle families hard. Childcare costs average £900 a month per child, forcing one parent to stay home, cutting income. Mental health, stress from this squeeze leads to more anxiety, with NHS waits long. Cultural shifts, middle class used to mean stability, and now, it's gig work and side hustles. Historical parallels, like the 1930s depression, but now it's slow erosion. The climax hits with 2025 data. The JRF pre-budget report says incomes fall by £550 this Parliament, worst on record. Lowest third falls twice as much as middle. Resolution Foundation, non-pensioner 10th percentile for percent worse off by 2029 to 30. ONS, median incomes down 2% in 2023 to 24. YouTube videos from 2025 scream goodbye, middle class with 14.3 million in poverty, 2/3 working. This is the key moment projection show by 2030, middle could shrink 10 to 15% if trends continue, based on these reports. Wrapping up, Britain's middle class boomed post-war through welfare and growth, peaked in the 90s, but since 2008, stagnant wages, high costs, and policies favouring the top have caused it to disappear quietly. Proof is in falling incomes, rising insecurity, huge wealth gaps. It means less social mobility, more division, weaker economy. But awareness is first step. Maybe policies like better housing, wage floors, or tax reforms could help. Subscribe for more on Britain's changing society.